Welcome to Pods with Posh and Paul, a podcast designed to inspire and challenge listeners through story, experience and insight. To face adversity, learn from suffering and discover how to embrace life with a heart filled with love and gratitude. We are so thrilled to have you journey with us and can't wait to share your stories. Join Sue O'Callaghan and Joanne Webb as we disrupt the theory that everyone has perfect lives. Today we are thrilled to welcome onto the show Sarah Menlove. As a New Zealand age group representative triathlete and personal trainer, Sarah took physical health to the extreme. This led to highly restrictive eating habits, an obsession with weight, and the loss of her period for over 4 years. When Sarah sustained a stress fracture in 2016, she was forced to look at what it really meant to be healthy and began the long and deeply challenging process of regaining her period and healing her relationship with food and her body. Through the power of coaching and by investing in her own coach and online group coaching programs, Sarah was able to reclaim her identity from that of an athlete and free herself from food and body shame. 4 years ago, Sarah would never have imagined it was possible to be where she is today and is so grateful for the lessons and tools she has gained to share this healing with other women.
Hi Sarah, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Sarah, so we're going to dive straight in, short and sharp. So you were a triathlete, you put your body through tremendous things to achieve certain things. Tell us the impact that had on you.
Yeah, so the impact that really pushing my body to the extreme through sport and restriction with food had on me was that I ended up losing my period for 4 years. I ended up moving away from a lot of other areas of my life that were important to me, social situations, things like that. I became very disconnected from my body and from myself and ended up with a stress fracture and, injured, unhappy, tired. So just really away from the truth of who I was and the things that I had once loved, I suppose.
So Sarah, we have teenage listeners who are involved in training excessively hard for sport, and that's one thing we have to do nowadays. If we're involved in sport or dance, we need to train. It's not as though we can just train once a week. The pressure on young children, young teenagers to train is huge. How did you feel about the whole intake-outtake situation in terms of the amount of food you needed to put in your body as opposed to the amount of calories you were burning? Did you feel as though that became something you really had to focus on in a sense where children that aren't training don't need to focus on how much they're eating?
I probably came to that when I was swimming in high school, when I was a teenager and I was swimming, I didn't think too much about food. I just kind of ate what I wanted to eat and trained the way I wanted to train. The difference at that time was I never really had any issues around how I felt about my body. I just swam, was fit, ate, was hungry all the time and ate when I was hungry. When I began triathlon, I'd gone through a period of beginning a job as a personal trainer and feeling like I really needed to change my body in order to fit into the gym environment. And so I entered triathlon from this perspective of I needed to be as small as possible and as lean as possible. And I actually went in with the mindset of restricting certain foods, and I probably continued that throughout my training. So even though I was training multiple hours a day, I was still eating like I was not training at all, or trying to lose weight rather than trying to fuel and make sure that I had enough energy available for my performance. And so it was so much more about my body in that time, and that's probably what I would, want to share is, are you fueling for your training and are you really, nourishing your body, or are you concerned about your size and staying a certain weight, or does your sport require you to stay a certain weight? And I think that can be really destructive to our relationship with food and with our bodies when that is the case.
Yeah, because they say exercise out of love for your body, not out of hate for your body, isn't it? And that's kind of the mindset that you were in by the sounds of it. You obviously loved swimming, had a passion for being healthy and fit. You went into that industry of being a personal trainer, yet you still got caught into that trap of what society's trying to make us do, trying to be a certain physique and a certain shape, I suppose. So it's a dangerous road to go down, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I don't think that many of us get out of this life without kind of having that influence us in some way. The messages that we receive as women in particular are so pervasive, and whether that's through sport or through the way that we were brought up or the media, those messages are everywhere about what it means to be a woman and be loved and be accepted and be, when it comes to sport, successful in your given sport. So I think I really took those messages on. I believed that in order to be successful, in order to be enough, and in order to be loved, I needed to be a certain size, I needed to be lean, I needed to be a certain body fat percentage, and that became what my whole relationship with exercise and food became about. Even though I did love what I was doing at the time, there was this destructive side to it as well.
And for our listeners, again, there will be teenagers thinking, gosh, yes, I'm in that destructive cycle. My periods have stopped. What is the message to girls whose periods have stopped? Are they in a dangerous situation, and how do they handle that?
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that your period is such an important marker of health. And I know for me, when I was training, I was kind of like, oh, this is cool. Like, I've lost my period. This means that I'm like really fit, and I'm, I must be doing something right because I'm training to this extreme, and this is just what happens to athletes. This is so common, and I almost wore that as a badge of honour. And looking back now, what I'd love to share with someone in that position is that actually your menstrual cycle is one of your vital signs of health as a woman, and it's so, so important to have that regular cycle, especially when you're exercising, because like what happened to me, I ended up with a stress fracture, and that really is the result of not having that hormonal release that happens when you are menstruating, and not having, the calories available for your bones and your muscles for your sport. And yeah, there's a whole lot around that under what's called hypothalamic amenorrhea, or REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport. And so yeah, I would really encourage you to look into that if that is you, and look at your energy availability and eating more, but also allowing yourself potentially more rest than what you're giving your body. And that might require some exploration around why it is that you feel that you struggle to allow yourself to rest or to eat more. And that's where the relationship with food and body comes up for many people, that there's this fear of the body changing, of gaining weight if you eat more. And that's really the work that I dive into now with women, is helping them heal that relationship with their body so that they can nourish themselves and care for themselves in a really healthy way.
And that's quite hard, because that also coincides with young girls changing body shape through puberty, and there's definitely a sense of a large proportion of girls experiences a sense of being out of control. You can't control the fact your body's changing shape, and it's developing more curves. So that, combined with sport and trying to have a healthy diet without becoming obsessive, is actually very hard, isn't it, for girls?
Yeah, it is. And so much compassion for that, because not only are you going through this life transition where you're like, who am I? You're no longer a young girl, you're turning into a woman, maybe you're developing feelings for someone of the opposite sex or someone of the same sex, so you're struggling with your own identity around sexuality and relationships and what it is that maybe you want to do in the world and all of these things. So there's a whole lot of pressure. Then you come into the school system, and there's a whole lot of pressure on performance in school and performance in sport. And that stress on the body alone is enough to stop a menstrual cycle, let alone then taking food into it. And so many women that I speak to, and most of the women I work with are in their 20s and 30s, we reflect on their body story and where that started. And in many of them, we go back to that puberty age, around 12, around 13, and what they were actually experiencing at that time. And so many go to food as a way to control what they don't feel like they can control in other areas of their life, whether that's moving away from home, or changing schools, or the body changing, or something changing in the family dynamics that might result in a desire for control. But yeah, there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and so it's important just for us to know, and for young women to know, it's okay for your body to change. It's totally normal and natural and a part of the life process that our body will change throughout the course of our life. And yeah, one of those really big first markers is through puberty, but obviously that happens again many times, especially for women throughout the course of our lives, with childbirth, with menopause, with different stages, and our society really doesn't allow for that. It has this warped perception that you're going to look the same your whole life, and there's this real, I suppose, romanticization, of a young, prepubescent female body, which is just, it's really unhealthy and destructive, because that isn't, healthy for us to stay that same size our whole life. So yeah.
And when you look at yourself, Sarah, so you were this, I look at you now, you're radiant, you're beautiful, you shine. And you did as a youngster as well. I look back on your photographs, and then there you were, putting your body through some grueling regime to train, not nourishing your body the way you should. And you had qualifications, you had knowledge to know what you should be doing, yet you still did the opposite, really, to what you know. You didn't rest enough, you weren't fueling your body in the correct way, and yet you still wanted to be the top performer within your field. Yeah, and here you are now, looking radiant, beautiful, healthy. What's the difference? How have you fallen in love with your body? How have you got to grips with enjoying food and listening to your body the way we all should be?
Gosh, that's a really big question. So I'm not going to be able to answer all of that, because it was a very long process for me. Like we've sort of explained, food and body things are deeply rooted and go back a really long way. And so for me, it has been and continues to be a journey, and it continues to be this really being compassionate with myself and learning to find the other areas of my life, the other parts of myself that give me value in the world. Because underneath all of this, and as teenagers, we often attach our worth to our sporting performance or to our school performance or our grades, right? And so when we attach our sense of self-worth to whether it's the size of our bodies or our sporting performance or our grades or our job or whatever it might be, then we have this tendency to really attach to that. And so for me, a big part of this work was really refinding my identity and my worth outside of those things, and finding things that I loved, that I loved about myself, the qualities that I have internally, like, I'm adventurous, I'm playful, I'm lovable, I'm a good listener, I'm open-minded, I'm caring, all of these qualities, and that's what I encourage people that come to my workshops and do my free programs and courses and things to find, is to really start to write down those things and start to ask your friends, ask your family, what is it that you love about me? And chances are they're not going to say, oh, I love you because you're a size, whatever size you are. I love you because you ran that 40-minute 10K that time, or I love you because you're X weight or whatever, right? And
absolutely, and it's a really important message, because if as soon as we allow our worth to be attached to something else, it can be taken away from us. Yet we know, as coaches, as people who have found our self-love and are still on our journey, we know that our worth is within us and we're all worthy. And that's what we try to instill in our clients, isn't it? And the people around us. We know we're all worthy and we're all beautiful. And it's an empowering thing to gain that back, isn't it? To think, I am just worthy just for waking up this morning. I don't need to prove that to anyone. I know I'm worthy.
And the other thing is, I think once you let go of having to fit in, of having to compete, of having to conform, and you understand that you're completely unique, that's when you start to shine. And certainly having been in the teaching profession from 35 years ago, then there was a sense that we needed to conform, we needed to fit into a mould, we needed to churn out hairdressers, doctors, lawyers, builders, whatever it was. But I think the world is so rapidly changing. Now the world is looking for people who are different, who are unique, and have their own intellectual property, which is to be different, it's not to be the same. And so the world is looking for innovators, it's looking for creativity, it's looking for all you beautiful teenagers to be exactly who you are, not to fit the mold of somebody else. So you teenagers who are listening, you are unique as you are, and you are beautiful as you are. And as Sarah says, when you start to find that separate from the media, separate from the expectations of everybody else, that's when you will start to shine. That's when we shine as individuals. I've got a question for you, which is, very clearly the transition from, the sporting obsession and diet is a mindset. It's finding ourselves, it's a mindset. How do we translate that mindset to mature into where you're at right now from where you were? How do teenagers say, I'd love to be where Sarah is, happy with herself, but I don't feel it, I'm not content, and I'm not quite sure how to get there? Is it they read books? Is it they listen to podcasts? Is it that they, what journey do they need to go on for the listeners that actually have to go on that journey? How do they do it?
There's a few steps to it, and it's not a linear journey. And I always say this to my clients: body image, self-love. It's a non-linear journey. You don't read a book or do a course or listen to one podcast and then you're done. It's this ongoing process. And I also always say that we live in a society that's like, the air that we breathe is the opposite of self-love, right? The air that we breathe is you're actually not good enough as you are. If we just take in the air being messages through mainstream media and images and magazines and TV and those sorts of things, right? And so one of the first steps that I get anyone to do is to really start to be conscious and change that air that we're breathing as much as possible. So looking at your social media, right? So the one thing that we do have control over is what we're absorbing and what we're seeing through our social media feed, which is where so many teenagers, are spending their time. And that can be a really empowering place, or it can be a place that leaves us feeling like we're not good enough, like we need to change our body to look like so-and-so, or we need to go on that diet that so-and-so is promoting, right? And that's really adding to those messages that create the self-destructive behaviours. So I would encourage anyone who's going on this journey to go through and have a big social media clear out of anyone that's promoting restrictive eating patterns, and that's any type of diet really that's not you just listening to your body. Anyone that's promoting really intense changing your body or only one type or shape of body. And then looking at what you're reading, what you're absorbing. Are you constantly looking at magazines that have really slim women in bikinis, or, not a diverse range of bodies or a diverse way of eating and way of training and things like that? And allowing yourself to remove any of those harmful messages from your immediate sphere so that you can bring in more of the things that are supportive for you on this journey. And I do have a resource list that I'm happy to share, and maybe you can pop into the notes for this episode, which has a whole lot of podcasts and books and articles and things that I've read and that I share with my clients that help shift that mindset, what you're absorbing. So you're removing and then you're bringing in more supportive material. That would be the first step. And then I have another practice which I can share, which I think is really powerful, and that is switching our mindset from, so often we go into self-criticism and we'll look in the mirror and we'll think, oh gosh, my body doesn't look like that, or oh, I've got that pimple, right, I've got that hair in this place, and I've got this pimple here, and got this hanging over, this little bit hanging over the top of my jeans or whatever, and we can really go down a destructive path with that. And it's really firstly having awareness, so noticing, okay, this is what's showing up for me, and then consciously choosing a new thought in that moment, right? I do deeper belief work with my clients, but on a kind of physical level, something you can do right away is change that thought and start to bring in gratitude for what that part of your body actually does for you, right? We get so used to thinking about how we look versus what we do, and this is so important in sports, right? Even though I was doing amazing things, I was still hyper-focused on how I looked. But now we can change that. We can say, okay, maybe I don't necessarily like the way my legs look today, because that might show up for you, and that's okay, right? But I can really say, thank you, legs. I'm so grateful that you've allowed me to go for that run or walk up that mountain or dance with my friends or anything, you know, and we can do that with every part of our body, and that's a really powerful practice. You can even practice that every day before you go to bed. Just go through your body and say, thank you, body, for this, thank you, body, for that, thank you, arms, for allowing me to hug, thank you, stomach, for digesting my food, and really shift out of that place of shame and self-punishment and guilt into a place of gratitude, and that's the start of really starting to build a loving relationship with yourself and with your body.
They're really, really beautiful and really helpful, because it is just about introducing new habits, isn't it, and changing the way that we do things, because if you don't change the way you do things, you're going to stay in that rut, aren't you? And you know, them things have both totally worked for me, and that's how they're part of my journey into self-love. I totally had to do affirmations. I totally had to learn to love myself. And it was definitely what I used to do. And the more you can appreciate your body for the things it does do. I mean, there's people out there who can't walk, who can't talk, who can't hear, who can't see. So be grateful for all the things you can, because it can be taken away from you. And life is very, very precious. So the more we can actually show gratitude anyway, you know, the healthier we are. And
listening to a lovely chat the other day, and somebody was talking to a double amputee, and they said to him, how can you be so grateful when you have no legs? And his response was, how can you be so negative when you have legs?
Yeah.
And it was just so empowering. And I would say, you know, Sarah, Joe and I are very big on finding mentors, especially for teenagers. Find mentors. You know, everybody knows the phrase, you are what you eat, but there's also a phrase, you are what you're looking at, you are what you're absorbing in terms of information. Go out and find yourself a mentor. Now, if listeners are thinking, well, I'd quite like to follow Sarah or listen to what she's talking about because she's an inspiration on this podcast, can they find you on social media? Where would they find you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, find me on Instagram at sarahmenlove.house, and I'll share the links with you ladies to share that with your audience. But yeah, Instagram, I'm on Facebook as well. But yeah, Instagram's probably the best place. That's all. I think, yeah, when we have that gratitude for what our body does, the thing that leads on from that is that we want to take care of it, right? We want to nurture it, we want to nourish it, we want to feed it, you know, enough and rest and everything like that, and really starting to move into those actions that come from having that. So, yeah, it's really beautiful.
Because we are just walking miracles, really, aren't we? When you think about how we're all put together and the systems within us, we are all uniquely beautiful, we are miracles, and absolutely our bodies should be worshipped by us ourselves.
Yeah, I think the chance of us being born, I'm not sure if this is the exact right number, is something like 40,000 or something. Like the chances of us being on this planet right now and the body that we're in today is an absolute miracle. And yeah, we knew that when we came into the world, and I do like to share that with workshops and things, is you can just look at a little baby, you know, look at how they treat their body, how they play with their body, the wonderment that they have for themselves. And that really is who we are and what we came into this world knowing. And so this is just really a process of remembering and removing all of the societal kind of conditioning and crap, for lack of a better word, that's been placed on us.
Thank you so much for your time today, Sarah. You are an inspiration, and you are a ball of love and a ball of radiance. So thank you for shining your light on us all today.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much for being with us today. For us to inspire others to live their magnificently imperfect life, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or on your podcast app. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Pods with Posh and Pool. We can't wait for you to join us on our next episode. Love, light and peace.